I'm out playing in the dirt. I'm out, communing with nature because I've made this very important trade-off to spend time doing this.
As a vegan, do you ever feel like you're living in a parallel universe, aware of things that many others don't even seem to notice, let alone acknowledge? I'm Chrissy Benson, host of the Vegan Posse Podcast. We talk with vegans from around the globe who, like you, are living lives of integrity and compassion with an eye toward justice. Through their personal stories, you'll come to see that you're not an outlier. In fact, you're part of an entire posse of individuals who aren't just keeping the peace, they're creating it through their food choices and beyond. You won't be saddling up, but you're in for the ride of your life. Welcome to the Vegan Posse. Hey Posse, I'm Chrissy Benson, host of the Vegan Posse, bringing vegans together to help animals everywhere. A few things to mention before we jump into this month's edition of our monthly series, Posse Talk with Jen Howk. First of all, on a personal note, I recently completed my master's degree in clinical mental health counseling. So I am officially no longer a student, except, of course, a student of life, the best university of all. I am accepting new coaching clients. So if you're looking for help in moving toward the life that you want and the person you want to be, give me a shout. The best way to reach me is via my direct email, christinembenson@gmail.com. If you've got questions for Posse Talk with Jen Howk, or if you've got guest suggestions, topic ideas, or just want to say hi, email veganposse.email@gmail.com. Finally, join me and a slew of other vegans and aspiring vegans at this year's Vegan Summerfest, July 9th through the 13th in Johnstown, Pennsylvania. It's going to be really fun with really amazing food. And when you register, make sure to mention you're part of the Vegan Posse, and they'll take extra good care of you. And without further ado, enjoy this month's Posse Talk with Jen Howk.
Do it.
All right. Welcome to this month's Posse Talk with Jen Howk. Jen, good to see you as always.
Good to see you. How's things going?
Good. And what are you looking forward to most for this year's Vegan Summerfest?
Oh, Summerfest it feels like I have several things happening before then, so I haven't quite gotten into the Summerfest consciousness yet. But it's just so fun. It's beautiful setting and great food and great talks, and everybody's a friend. Everybody's a member of the tribe, so you don't have that kind of social distance anxiety of, do I have to suss this out? Do I have to out myself as a vegan and have the whole thing? Is this going to be, do I have to go to the cafeteria and have to forage around for something edible? Like everything's vegan, everything's fantastic. And it's just it's super fun. Everyone should come. Chrissy and I are both speaking. So, you should come see us and see all the other amazing talks and come eat food with us.
Yes. I wholeheartedly second that. The food is probably by far the thing that I look forward to the most. One thing I also really like about the meals is that it's all you can eat buffet style, which is definitely my thing. But also the timing is structured so that it gets me eating dinner earlier than I usually do at home, which I know is good for me because the meals are generally from what is it, like 5 to 6:30 or something like that for dinner?
Yeah.
Which is good for me because I often don't end up eating until like 7 or 8 at night, like many times. So for me, that's good. Yeah.
We tend to be, we're on the early bird special around my house. And so it's right
on. Of course you are. Yes.
But it's funny how after a day or two, like life revolves around the meal times at Summerfest. Like everybody, it's a lot of food. It's all you can eat, but it's just also, it just feels like it's always time to eat. It's always time to go to the cafeteria, go get food. And everyone gets a little obsessive and excited about it. And, there's just everything from kind of vegan junk food to really healthy food, to SOS free food, to a raw bar, so there really is, you can be as healthy as you want, which is nice, or you can mix and match, which I do, which is great. And so it's just, it's really, really fun.
Yeah. And I like the raw room.
Yeah, the
I
raw
always start
room.
with the raw room, which is very, very fancy, very exotic.
Very, very fancy. Very, I went in there once when it was like taco lunch, and so all the tortillas are raw. The guacamole was sublime. All these great salsas. So they really go all out. It's really
They do, and it's like super sexy because I'm not typically like I do eat a lot of raw food at home, but it's not fancy raw food. It's just like basically chopped raw vegetables. I'm a big fan of raw red cabbage, which I know is kind of unusual, but
I prefer red cabbage raw as well.
I
Like
love it. Yeah.
massage salad or something. So much better than I don't like cooked cabbage at all, but I love it raw in a salad, or
I like to eat it. I just cut it into like bite-sized pieces and eat it with my fingers. I'm big on eating with my fingers. I don't use silverware unless I'm in public company, essentially, or eating soup. Soup is kind of tough to eat with your fingers.
Kind of requires
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, what about you? What are you most looking forward to?
I'm looking forward to the food. And again, there's just no substitute for being in an environment where vegan is normal and
Totally.
where people are as passionate about animal rights, sometimes even more so than
Totally.
me.
Yeah.
Which is so nice. I still remember meeting a couple there a couple of years ago who were from Canada, and they were just hardcore longtime vegans who they used to take children in as foster children, and their households would always be vegan, and that had caused them a great deal of hassle with the Canadian authorities, who, heaven forbid, the foster kids were getting actual food when they lived with these people. But I mentioned the animal rights conference to them, and they just chuckled dismissively and said, "Oh, you mean the animal welfare conference?"
Whoa, that's fired.
And it just cracked me up, because even though it's been quite some time since I've been to the animal rights conference, but just
I went last year, and I would in no way characterize it as an animal welfare conference. I mean, it's still
no, me either. But there have been a few things that they've definitely hosted some debates. Like there was one year when there was a big debate between Gary Francione, the abolitionist approach, and Bruce Friedrich, who, I don't think he would qualify himself as anything less than abolitionist, but he's not opposed to welfare, harm reduction measures. And, it was, there was definitely some stuff where I was feeling, okay, I'm clearly on one side rather than the other. And so anyway, I definitely got the joke, at least. But just the fact that these people were nuanced enough to have a strong opinion on it. And I just thought it was like endearing, and just, I loved it, even if I didn't, necessarily think it was totally justified or fair.
I mean, it's a very clever signaling device to sort of well,
exactly.
Not reading what an ethical vegan I am. Let me, kind of make a joke, not a joke, about just establishing my place on the continuum.
And not to mention too, I mean, just for people listening who may not be as radicalized as Jen and I am at this point, there are plenty of people at Vegan Summerfest who are vegan curious or vegan aspiring, or just trying to get healthier. So it's not like you won't feel welcome or you'll be excluded or shunned or looked down on if you're not totally there yet. You'll be encouraged and nurtured and cheer-led.
I mean, that's the purpose of the event, right?
Yes.
It's educational. It's sort of like, let's make veganism super appealing, and kind of provide the social. I mean, there's movies and kind of social activities and dances and, things after hours and singles table and all sorts of things going on. So they do really make an effort to like integrate people and get people to know each other. So.
Yes. And I really love seeing the kids there too. I mean, I don't have kids, and it's not even that I necessarily like am like, hugely kid friendly myself, but I just love seeing it be normalized for the kids. And I love seeing the kids have their vegan friends and
that they see it's summer camp. It really has a very summer camp.
Yeah.
These very minimal accommodation dorms. Often 2 to a dorm. And it's it's just like being a freshman in college again, or summer camp. It's really uncomfortable plastic mattress and like this.
The accommodations are not luxurious. And in fact, my friend Martin Rowe in New York City, he used to refer to Summerfest as summer camp, with kind of a mildly condescending tone. And I don't disagree, but to me, it's more in a fun sense. It's kind of like the summer camp experience I never had.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I would encourage people to bring their own pillow. maybe bring your own pillow. Other creature.
That's a good idea. I will do that. I did not do that.
Yeah, maybe I brought my own sheets last year because the sheets are like industrial scratchy sheets, and if you want that experience as part of the charm, that's fine. But I'm pushing 50 and I like better sheets.
No, that's really good advice. And those little details are sometimes details that escape me. But that's a great idea. I'm going to do all of the above now that you mention it.
Really improves the experience, and you can focus on the time without being irritated by all that stuff. So
right. And what's fun for me too is I've gotten in the habit. I drive there from Nashville, Tennessee, and halfway, a really nice midway point is Columbus, Ohio, where Pam Popper's group is located. And I have a vegan friend who lives there, who I usually stop and spend the night with. And so that's just like a great segue into the whole experience, another vegan community. And one year I was passing, because oftentimes Summerfest is right around the 4th of July. So a couple of years ago, it worked out that it was literally the 4th of July when I was passing through Columbus, and my friend was hosting this like epic 4th of July, totally vegan, whole food, plant-based event. Awesome. Everything down to the American flag cake, that was whole food, plant-based, decorated with, red, like the flag was sliced up strawberries and blueberries. And it was beautiful. Yeah.
That is, it's so funny. I just planted some zucchini because my birthday's in July, and I'm like anticipating my Whole Foods plant-based vegan birthday cake, which is a zucchini chocolate cake, and so I want to be able to grow my own zucchini for it.
That's amazing. And what day is your birthday again?
I don't know if I want that public knowledge. Let's just say it's late July.
I know I have it in my calendar, but I'll have to look at that. Yes. Because you're a Leo, correct?
Yeah. So there's only a couple of days it could be for people who know astrology. So it's late July.
Yes. And is this going to be 50 for you?
No, not quite. Almost. Getting there.
Nice.
Yeah. So, but it's I love that the high summer ability it really whole food plant-based diet shines in summertime. And I plant things in advance of that, and hoping to I've had trouble with zucchini the last couple of years with powdery mildew, but I feel like I have a solution now. I'm armed with a solution. And so I have high hopes for a bumper crop. So we'll see what happens.
That's really cool. And in fact, that was one of that was on my list of topics that I wanted to get to today, was the topic of growing your own food, which is something that I know you do a fair amount of. I really don't do any of. So what do you grow at your various households?
Yeah, everything I possibly can. It's been really exciting. I'm in West Virginia right now, and over here, so I planted the first things here some things in the fall of 22, mostly in the spring of 23. So most things have been here for 2 years, and it's like really you're starting to see I'm starting to feel the results of the time. So there's a saying in permaculture that, or I guess maybe it's just generally with fruit trees in general, which is that the first year you plant them, they sleep. The second year they creep. The third year they leap. And they're leaping. Things are leaping. Things are getting big. Things are. I walked around today, and my pear tree here is putting on a couple of little fruits. Like I can see little fruits, pollinating pear, I think. The service berries have berries on them. Everything is sort of like really trying to be productive. And the same thing in Virginia, where it's kind of the similar timeline where this was the first year that the first apple tree I planted there, this is the first year it flowered. I don't think it has a pollinator, so it probably isn't going to set fruit, but it's really, you start to see the fruits of your labor at about year 3. So with fruit trees, it is kind of a long game. You have to be patient with things, but definitely with an annual garden, I've had success with lots of things, kind of surprising things. I've figured out now what does better in this area and what doesn't. Some things do really, really well. Some things that you would think would do well don't do well. Some things do fantastically and get eaten by groundhogs or deer before you can get a chance to. Almost everything gets eaten by groundhogs or deer. And so it's been this learning curve of what do I like, what do I enjoy planting, because there's some things I could plant that are going to do really well, like okra. Okra has done really well here. I don't want to eat a lot of okra. I like the novelty of having some okra every summer that maybe I'll pop in the air fryer or something, but I'm not going to go crazy for a huge crop of okra.
Yeah.
So finding that balance of, well, yeah, I can grow it, but I also need to be, I want to be able to eat it and enjoy eating it and incorporate it into recipes. So it's so satisfying. It's such a fun hobby and vocation.
So you've had your place in West Virginia for how long now?
Since early fall 22. So
wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Didn't really do much with it until kind of the spring, summer 23 was when I really started to plant things and do things. Because when I got it, it was a project. I had to rip out all the carpet. I repainted everything.
I remember that. Yeah.
It was very, I remember when I sent my brother the Zillow link, he was like, wow, it's the dream of the 90s house. And it really was kind of had a very 90s, early 90s aesthetic, almost an 80s aesthetic, because that's when it was built and a lot of things hadn't been changed in that time. And it has had a lot of owners, a lot of turnover. There's a lot of trash in the woods here. It's just kind of an ongoing source of projects and improvement. But I have a really strong commitment to that kind of sentiment that you have if you're backcountry camping, where you leave it better than you found it. You pack out all your trash and you really try to improve it. So I've been very diligently trying to improve the soil, which was really hard packed. They've been driving on it and it's in really bad shape, driving on it and mowing it really short, which deprives it of moisture and deprives it of microbial activity. So I've just been letting things grow. I kind of cut these paths through the jungle out there, which gives it a very secret garden effect. And it's very cool. So there's just been project after project to kind of try to improve it, try to bring some organic matter back into it, just put a lot of mulch and compost back into the system and see what happens. And it's starting to, I'm now seeing in, 2.5 years, this kind of, this real things are starting to change. So.
Wow. And how much land do you have?
Total, the property is almost 5 acres, but most of that is woods. So
okay.
It, kind of goes straight back into the woods, and it's I have sort of long-term plans for stuff that I want to do back there. And I've planted some things, some shade lovers back there, little blueberries and other sort of low shade loving plants, but kind of, I have, I don't know if we've ever talked about cob. Have we ever had a conversation about cob on or off?
I don't think so. No.
I'm a little obsessed with the idea of cob building. So,
okay, like you mean structures.
yeah.
Yeah. We have talked a little about this, or I've heard you talk about it. Yes.
Yeah, so I have visions of building cob structures back in the woods and, kind of doing cool things back there and really stewarding that forest space. I don't want to just clear it out and plant fruit trees there. I want to like use what's there and work with the system. The kind of a core concept of permaculture is that you work the edges of the system. And so that's basically what I've been doing. The edges are the most ecologically rich area because there's sort of greater diversity there. It's still getting enough sunshine. So I kind of just work one edge at a time and see.
Like, and by edge, what do you mean? Do you mean the edge of your property or the edge of just the different sorts of terrain?
Yeah, where one kind of ecosystem meets another one. So where the lawn meets the forest, where the marsh meets the grassland or whatever. So that's always a very interesting space, and that's where all the pioneer species show up. So it's where you get these very fast growing nitrogen fixing trees that are impossible to kill and often can be a little invasive. And so part of the work here is to clear out those invasive trees. Here it's a lot of autumn olive. That's what really likes to colonize. And I happen to like the autumn olive berries. They're very tasty, but
I've never heard that word before. I don't
of
even know.
olive, you probably have them down there. They're pretty ubiquitous. Right now they're in flower and they smell intoxicating. You drive along and it's just this incredible smell. And every tree tastes a little different. So just because it's not an olive tree, the berries might not be that great, but some are really great. But I do tend to curate them, so I don't let everyone that self-seeds the birds seed them all over the place. And so I'll let some stay, but not all of them. I'll plant something else in its place. I'll plant something else in the understory. So there's kind of this ongoing removal of invasive species and replacement with more beneficial species.
Okay. And someone asked me the other day exactly what permaculture means. And I was like, I don't know the definition. What is the definition of permaculture?
I think it's probably one of those things, like many things, where everybody is going to give you a slightly different definition, but it's permanent agriculture. That's where the word comes from. And the idea is that it's a design system. It's a design system to work with the environment in a more self-sustaining way, that you're essentially trying to mimic what nature does. You're mimicking no one goes out and waters the forest. Nobody goes out and prunes those trees. There's no maintenance required for that system to be completely self-sufficient and incredibly resilient to, whether it's a drought summer or a rainy summer or whatever's going on. So a lot of that resilience comes from retaining the organic matter over the course of the cycle. So the trees lose their leaves, they fall to the forest floor. Nobody rakes them up and bags them up and takes them away. They just sit there and decompose, and they build more soil and so on and so forth. So there's also a whole ethics that goes with permaculture about, kind of community ethics. And it's not vegan by definition. It should be. But there are some vegan permaculture people, trying to change that. I think it's very compatible with a vegan worldview in the sense that you're trying to really work with the system. You're trying to do as little harm as possible. You're trying to reduce your footprint as much as possible. And you really are trying to leave it in a place where it can take care of itself and be really productive by itself. It intersects. It's not necessarily, a lot of people who practice permaculture also are more interested in edible plants, like human edible plants, and building food forests and things like that. You can be a permaculture aficionado and not necessarily focus on those things, but really just be more native trees in general and cultivating things that way. But as long as I'm doing it, I want more human food, which is also shared by wildlife too. So the birds enjoy those service berries as much as I am, probably more so. So yeah, it's just a really it doesn't make sense to me to do gardening in any other way. Like you're just doing it in this approach that is for the long term and really with sustainability in mind.
Well, so how much food are you able to grow for yourself?
I mean, in theory, it would be a lot if Mildred the groundhog did not destroy my supply every year. It's hard to know what the actual harvest would be if it wasn't being completely demolished by this voracious groundhog. I saw her yesterday.
Wow.
I could see her from the deck. Hey, Lucy, it's okay. Thank you for your service. And she was just out there, sitting on her haunches, eating things in the forest, just living her best life. She's super cute. But I think I could grow, definitely not a completely self-sustaining amount of food, not at the scale that I'm at right now with the gardens that I have. Once the fruit trees are all at full capacity and going, I think I could get to that point. But right now, I mean, we're talking, definitely enough to feed a small family while things are in full harvest in the summer and into the early fall. So
are you able to provide for yourself in terms of your vegetables and fruits? Do you grow enough that you don't buy stuff at the grocery store?
In the summer,
that's amazing. Wow, that's amazing.
Not perfectly, but it supplements it pretty strongly. So I'll still go buy, like a couple of years ago, I planted a crop of scarlet runner beans and it was doing amazingly well. And it was like I don't know if you ever read the Little House books when you were a kid.
Oh, yes. All of them. Yes.
So you remember the pause wheat crop that gets destroyed by the grasshoppers? There's
yes.
And he's sort of like counting his chickens before they've hatched in that story. He's borrowed, I think, a bunch of money from the bank because he's expecting this big crop. And he thinks, I've really made it. My ship has come in. And then of course these locusts come in and destroy the whole crop. And it's really quite a terrifying story, actually. So that happened to me with the scarlet runner beans, where I had I think 2 garden beds full of them, and they were just beautiful and they were producing super well. And then overnight they're all gone. Somebody got them. Wow. I don't know if it was Mildred or somebody else, but really ate kind of every single pod I had.
Wow. And how did you feel when that happened?
Oh, super sad. Super sad. Really, had been looking forward to it and also excited about having successfully proven to myself that I could grow kind of a staple crop, because it's one thing to be able to grow greens, and tomatoes do really well. I've had really good luck with tomatoes, not so much last year, but before that, been able to grow a lot of good tomatoes. But you're not going to get really enough calories with your broccoli and your tomatoes. And broccoli actually doesn't do very well. It gets eaten by bugs and birds. So you really want to be able to grow some kind of more calorie dense crops. And for me, that's mostly beans. I had really good luck with soybeans. I grew some black soybeans, grew quite a lot of those. I've been lucky with amaranth. I can grow a lot of amaranth for grain. I'm going to try with sorghum this year. We're going to see how that goes. And I can't quite plant potatoes yet because I don't have, my soil is very hard clay and it's not great for potatoes. And I don't really have the patience to go out there and fuss with the potatoes and hill them all the time. And so I don't focus on potatoes, although I do always plant a few and I get a few. They just can't really burrow too far under the ground. But
interesting.
Soil improves. So it's just a constant kind of experimentation to see, but definitely for, summer salads and for not just from what I can grow, but what's forageable as well. So, you start off, often the wine berries are the first to come into season, usually sometimes as early as May, but usually by June you have wine berries to forage and they're delicious.
You're naming all these vegetables and fruits that I don't know what they are. I don't know what wine berries are.
Wine berries are they're very raspberry-like. They look like raspberries and taste quite a bit like them, but they're not. They don't have the little baby hairs on them, and they're maybe a little tangier. Raspberries are pretty sweet a lot of the time, and they just grow wild everywhere here. The forest is full of them, more so in Virginia than here in West Virginia, but so many of them. And usually by the time they've closed out, the autumn olive is starting to come on, and the black walnuts that we have around here, also there's tons of those. And so if you're out in the woods and you're foraging, you can supplement with a lot of just readily available food too.
So how much time did you spend, preparing your soil and like preparing these garden beds? What do they look like? Like, do you have raised beds and pots, or is it all just right in the ground?
Yeah, so it's been a learning curve. So when I started in Virginia, I did do raised beds. So I have been trying to build up the organic matter over time. I brought in a bunch of wood chips, which is ideal. That's kind of what you really want to be able to do. The only way I've been able to successfully do that, you can sign up with like wood chip aggregators. One's called Chip Drop, that technically partners with local arborists and tree services in your area. And if they have a truckload, they'll drop the wood chips for you. Most people don't have great luck with that because they only do it if it's super convenient to them and literally on the way to wherever it is that they would otherwise dump things.
And what happens with the wood chips? Like that composes and like feeds the soil?
Yep. Okay. So wood chips are a mulch layer initially, and over time they build the kind of soil you really want, which is a fertile, dominant soil. And so in a perfect world, I would have a big haul of wood chips every year that I could mulch with. And they're really good for weed suppression around the things that you actually do want to grow. And then, they decompose and they become part of the soil ecosystem. I don't always have access to wood chips. There's tight competition for it, and it's just, doesn't always work out to get them. But I do have pretty much an endless supply of grass clippings. And so I use grass clippings for kind of the same thing, because you can mulch with those, and you can also, they decompose into the soil in the same way. So anything you have, leaves, wood chips, grass, it's all gonna work. Yeah. So when I first built the raised beds, I think I did kind of what's called a hugel culture bed, which is, I forget if it must be a German word, but the idea is that you build up kind of a bunch of logs and branches and leaves and sticks and things to give you some volume underneath the soil that you're planting into, and it will break down over time. And so I did that with some sheet mulching with cardboard to keep the weeds down. And then brought in a little topsoil to put on top of that and planted into that. So
it sounds very complicated.
It sounds complicated. I think it's, it's just one of these things that you build on the knowledge over time. So one of the things I remember reading when I first started getting into the whole gardening, permaculture, orchard thing was, don't try to do too much too soon. Pick one or two things you want to grow and focus on that. Don't get overwhelmed by all of the stuff. And of course, I kind of ignored that and just
right. Of course, yes.
And I just overwhelmed myself, and I tried to do too much, and I just lost a lot of crops and killed a lot of trees. And I do wish I had taken that advice. So I will go ahead and repeat it here to anybody who, if you're a total garden newbie, I would start with one bed. I would not necessarily even do a raised bed. I might do some sheet mulching, which is you go take some, you probably have a bunch of Amazon boxes at your house. And so take the tape off of them and go put them on the ground outside to suppress the weeds, water them very well with the hose so they're wet. And then on top of that, put some compost, put a layer of compost that you get locally, ideally vegan compost, or, if you can't find that, then, I know lots of people who have gotten local compost from people's pet horses or something like that. It just kind of depends on what's available, where your ethics are with all of that. You can either plant straight into the compost, or you can add a little topsoil or potting soil on top of that and plant into that. And then you're good to go. I mean, the plants that you plant into that are going to be really happy. And the cardboard will break down quickly, and it'll soften the ground underneath the bed that you've built over time, and the roots will be able to get into it. You're not going to be able to plant potatoes or carrots or other roots in that bed.
A root vegetable, yeah.
You could plant something like a daikon radish, which is very vigorous and is going to drive through that soil no matter how compacted it is, which will help break it up. And the idea is that you actually leave those radishes in the ground. You can eat the tops if you want, but go ahead and leave the radishes in the ground to break down, feed the worms. It's all this kind of long-term cultivation idea. You're not going to get a really beautiful, rich, organic garden in your backyard overnight, but within 3 or 4 years, you could have really rich soil. So.
And I'm curious, have you found it really empowering to grow your own food?
Yeah, I mean, it's just super cool to grow something from seed and to watch it pop up out of the ground and then to see it become, especially in the case of a tomato, like start with tomatoes, depending on your region or where you are, but tomatoes are pretty easy to grow. You can grow them from seed pretty easily, or you can go to your local garden center and get a plant for a couple of bucks. And if you get an indeterminate tomato, which means it's going to produce all season long, it's going to just go crazy. It's going to turn into like an 8-foot plant that you're going to have to stake. It's going to make a ton of fruit for you. And it's just to get a sense of how abundant nature wants to be and how little effort really is involved in partnering with nature to access that kind of abundance. It's pretty amazing. You do get a sense of, you get humbled by it. You get excited by it. You realize that there's no guarantee because you could get some tomato blight, or Mildred could start eating tomatoes.
And my tomatoes kept splitting, like they would never.
They'll split a lot of the time. That's probably some varieties are more prone to splitting than others. So if you've had problems with that, you might just look into like what's a split, sort of resistant variety. Some of the best, tastiest heirloom varieties are very prone to splitting, and you just have to live with that. It's sort of part of the deal. But it is probably some deficiency in the soil that they're responding to, or maybe climatic conditions too. I'm not sure what drives that. Same with the powdery mildew, like that just kept killing my zucchini. I'd get these terrible cases of it, and I just know now that that's happening. It's gonna happen. I need to basically prevent it ahead of time with essentially a baking soda spray. There are other ways to do it, but you need to change the pH of the leaf temporarily to prevent that mildew from taking hold. And the most eco-friendly way I found to do that is with baking soda. So
interesting. So how much time do you spend in your garden, like with your plants, doing stuff?
In the summertime, a lot of time. Yeah, several hours a day at least. I mean, kind of gets to a point in this region where most of the summer I don't want to be out there between 11 and 4. So it's but I'll spend an hour or two out in the morning, and then in the evening I'll be out there again for an hour or two, usually is how it shakes out, because there's so much to do. You're weeding, you're picking bugs off of plants. Certain plants attract certain bugs, and you just kind of have to hand pick them off and throw them into the bushes. And you're looking for any signs of disease. Perhaps you're succession planting. I've never really been on top of things to do that, but most people who are serious about gardening, especially gardening in a way that is really replacing their grocery store runs, you need a succession plant, which means that you plant a bunch of lettuce seeds now, and then in 2 weeks you plant another round of lettuce seeds, so you can just harvest continually. I don't have my act together enough to do that.
Okay.
I kind of plant everything once at the beginning of the season, and then maybe I'll do another early fall garden later on for colder weather plants. But
yeah, so we're almost into May at this point. Do I still have enough time to plant some things?
Yeah, totally. You probably don't have a lot of time to plant things from seed at this point. You're going to be running behind if you do that, but you can go to the garden center or go online even, and buy some starts for things, and get those starts in there, and you're right on time. So that's in fact, I had a ton of tomatoes. I was feeling so smug about my tomato seed game this year, where I had 12 plants started with 4 different varieties or whatever it was, all back in March. And a bunch of them just crapped out on me. A bunch of the seedlings just have, they're older seeds at this point. I think some of those seeds were getting up to 3 or 4 years old. So they germinated, but they just didn't go anywhere. And so I have a couple that have made it through that are going to be okay, I think, but I do want to supplement with that. So I'm going to get a couple of replacement plants, and no shame in that.
Okay. Yeah. Cause this gardening thing is one of the big things on my vegan, just, sustainability, like personal sustainability list, because it does just make sense. One of my friends, the way he put it was, okay, we go to work, we spend all these hours a day working so that we can buy food. But if we can just grow our own food, kind of cut out the middleman and just do it ourselves, then it just makes so much sense. And like, I know you're familiar with the work of Dr. Zach Bush, but he talks a lot about, just growing food and just how empowering that is, and how game changing it is, just in terms of your worldview and your sense of personal autonomy and capability. And so it's something that I've, taken some steps toward, but I haven't had any long-term like consistency or success really with it. Partly because I don't have a ton of space. So I've always been kind of lazy in terms of figuring out the logistics. But
I think ironically, having less space, like I think some of the most amazing gardens I've seen, especially just annual type gardens, are very small suburban gardens where people are really constrained by space. You get enough sunshine to work with it, but you're in a space where you're not going to have, I'm just being on the edge of a forest means I have all this pressure, all this deer pressure, groundhog pressure.
Right.
And I don't have a really great fence set up, so just everybody comes in. But in the burbs, you're not going to have that as much. I've even seen amazingly productive, and you can find on YouTube people growing, all the food that they need for a family of 4 on like a 50 square foot balcony or something. Like people are able to do really amazing things. You can use vertical gardening. The dollar store has stackable containers that you can stack up on your balcony, which are great. There's many different ways to do it. I was into hydroponics for a while, kind of got away from it because I can't find a way to make it work with my own fertilizer. So I would love hydroponics, and I do some aquaponics because I have when I bought this house, it had a pool that came with it, an above ground pool, which of course I've just let turn into a pond. I've planted.
I remember that. Yeah. How's the pond?
Oh, it's awesome. I heard frogs for the first time today when I came. The frogs love it. But, I've planted lily pads out there and all kinds of aquatic loving plants. And there's water celery and just crazy water chestnut, all kinds of things out there. And I also would like this year to plant some rice out there. So this has been a long standing make kind of a big floating planter and get some rice, because it's going to have so much access to the nutrients in that pond from all of the organic matter. And then I have enough plants with the roots to help clean the water so it doesn't turn into a total bog. So I'm into aquaponics in that sense. Hydroponics is more of the sterile system where you're immersing the plant roots in a nutrient solution, and there's kind of different ways to do it. And it's very cool, but I don't think there's a way to do it with, homemade nutrient solution or homemade compost or anything like that. So I don't want to be buying big bags of artificial fertilizer just so I can grow hydroponics tower.
Right.
But research continues on this matter. And in the meantime, I'll compromise with the aquaponics, fishless aquaponics. If fish appear in that pond, which they could, sometimes birds will carry fish seeds or fish eggs.
Really?
Yeah. I check it periodically to see if any fish have appeared in there.
That is so interesting. That is something that would never have occurred to me, that fish could end up there.
Get into landlocked lakes, it's just
that is so interesting. Wow.
Jurassic Park told us. It's very
wow. What is your indoor pool pond like? What does it look like? Does it smell?
No.
Okay.
It's because the idea is that you have these if you have enough roots of live plants in the water, it's just like the little, pond that's near the house. It's doesn't smell. It's got, it's got sort of a muddy bottom, and there's all kinds of things lurking in the mud down there. But the natural filtration that is happening as a result of the plant life that's living in there keeps it, as long as you have the ratio right, keeps the water fairly clean. What happens a lot is that people will put fish in their ponds. They'll put fish, or there will be an overpopulation of fish, and then things get out of whack. There's so much nutrient at that point, and so much ammonia from all the fish pee that the plants basically can't filter all of it. So I don't have that problem at this point. I've seen a lot of snails in there, a lot of water bugs of all types, tons of dragonflies, and the frogs. The frogs are just, that is their summer camp.
Wow, that is so interesting.
And I might be a little iffy on eating the rice myself that I grow there. It's really more of an offering to the wildlife.
Why would you be iffy about it?
I don't know if I would or I wouldn't. I'd have to do a little more research, but just because I don't exactly know the nutrient dynamic of what's happening under the water, and there's a lot of muck down there. And so
it wouldn't have any pesticides or like arsenic or anything like that.
No.
Which is like some of the concerns with regular rice.
Totally. Yeah. It's not going to have any of that. And it's the problem is that there could be some bacterial film that is clinging to those roots that I'm not aware of, that I haven't tested or investigated. But on the other hand, we're growing an organic matter that's going to happen. So I do take nibbles of the water celery all the time. So it hasn't killed me yet.
I don't even know what water celery looks like. Does it look like regular celery?
It doesn't look much like regular celery. It tastes like it. So it's just
weird.
An aquatic plant that I made little floating planters out of, what do you call them? Pool noodles. So I took pool noodles, I ran some galvanized wire through them to make like a ring, and put that around the pot so the pot floats in the water. And so that's how I have my floating plants in the pond. And it's awesome because the frogs sit on the pots, and they hang out, and it adds layers and different types of environments for different animals to land on and eat and procreate and do everything they want to do. So
it's so interesting. So if you walk by it, like, does it look like an outdoor pool, or like what does it look like?
Certainly from the road, it looks like it. And I leave the ladder in it. So anybody that falls in there could find their way out. So there's lots of sticks on the top and ways of egress for anybody who gets stuck in there. And so, you don't know until you get right up to it and you peer into it. And probably most people would just think like, oh my God, this chick needs to clean her pool, because it's sort of,
that is so funny.
It is a layer of muck at the bottom, just like you're going to find in a pond, which is what you want. That's where critters like to hide. And, that's what the lily has rooted itself into. And the leaves that fall into it every year decompose and become part of that. And it's basically building soil on the bottom of a pond.
Yeah. So it sounds like you're really connected to your space, to your lands, to your property.
Yeah. I mean, this is my parents had this kind of back to the land fantasy when my dad was from Fairbanks and my mom was from Anchorage. And when they met, they bought this place that was totally off grid in the middle of nowhere, an hour or two outside of Anchorage. And at the time they bought it, didn't have any heat, didn't have any running water, didn't have any insulation, really was quite rustic. And I think being raised in that environment, they didn't have a lot of competence. They didn't have a lot of skill. They didn't have YouTube. They had old Foxfire books, and they had the Good Life books, the Scott and Helen Nearing books, which I think inspired a lot of people. And I continue to find very inspiring. They were vegan, or almost entirely vegan, if not entirely vegan. And really, embodied these principles kind of before anybody else did. And I think that just got into my bones, man. There was something about the hanging out. I had my own little garden in that house that I grew my little perennials in. And I had my early formative years were very much outside in the woods, foraging around. I remember discovering I could eat chickweed and how cool that was, and how chickweed was really sweet, and I didn't expect that. And yeah, I think it's in many ways full circle to what I sort of am enmeshed in. And I think that's true for really species in general, that, at base level, this is what we're supposed to be doing, and we're supposed to be part of the whole cycle in this way. So
yeah. So you got some good things from your parents.
Yep, some good inadvertent things. I was thinking the other day about my poor mom just never really managed to get the garden really growing in any sort of major sense. But she'd grow a couple potatoes every year. She managed to grow carrots, which I'm actually in retrospect very impressed by, because I have a terrible time growing carrots. Carrots are very difficult to seed.
Depends on the soil a lot.
Depends on the soil, and so much can go wrong. If it rains too hard on them before they've germinated, they're gonna die. There's so many things that can happen. But she had really good luck. She would grow these enormous, really sweet, really delicious carrots, really pretty good cabbage. And we had strawberries and chives and things like that. But she had like one apple tree, and she would complain bitterly every single year that the moose kept eating her apple tree. And I remember even as a kid, I was like, well, you could put a fence around it. Like you could do something to try to protect the apple tree, but she just wanted to complain about it.
That's so interesting. Yeah, my mom is a really fabulous gardener, and she's just she's so intrepid. We always had growing up in New York State, we had a beautiful garden, and her parents, my grandparents, had a farm in South Jersey, and it had really great soil for growing things. And so the carrots would come out of that soil just, like this thick around. I mean, just crazy.
Forearm size. They were enormous.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. They were so just, robust and just solid. And the tomatoes, I mean, there were these golden tomatoes that were just the most delicious things ever. And we would just come back with these grocery bags full of these golden tomatoes, and we would just eat them in the car, just like apples. And they were so good.
There's nothing like a garden tomato. Like if all you grow tomatoes, that's worth it, they're pretty easy to grow. You can grow them in containers really easily. They're pretty forgiving. And so I would encourage everybody to, at the very least, grow tomatoes. And
well, I'm recommitting to start growing tomatoes. I'm declaring it right here, right now. Because I tried, and again, I got disheartened because they would all just end up splitting, and I kind of none of them lasted. But my mom, even now, they live in a condo complex in Florida, but my mom, and they don't even have like private lands. Everything's kind of owned by the condo association, but my mom doesn't let that stop her. She'll just, throw things in the ground. She threw she'll just plant things and see what happens. I think she planted a fig, now there's a fig tree. She threw in a pineapple, head, like now there's a pineapple growing. I mean, just these crazy things that you would never in a million years expect, and this is just from like a fruit that she brought from the grocery store and ate, but just decided to throw it in the ground.
I've done that with apple seeds all over the place here. I have little apple trees coming up everywhere from where I've just planted seeds. And
really,
the apples operate is that's a genetically distinct seed. You have no idea what kind of apple you're going to get. It could be terrible. It could be the next Honeycrisp. So, either way, it's going to be a beautiful tree that's feeding the soil. And if it turns out to be a really crappy apple, then, maybe I'll use it for rootstock and graft another variety onto it, or maybe I'll just give it to the deer, or who knows what'll happen. But yeah, it's uniquely satisfying to grow things from seed, especially from just food that you ate anyway, that you got from the grocery store. And I've done a ton of that, and it's very, very fun. I have a whole batch of peaches that I grew from seed. Peaches grow very, very readily from seed, so it's fun to experiment.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. Fascinating. And I know, just from a self-efficacy perspective, that kind of stuff must be just so impactful, because I know, a lot of friends who came from dysfunctional families or whatever, they talk about just feeling like no matter what they did, like they could plant seeds, but they were just never going to grow. And so I would imagine the experience of doing that and seeing them grow, whether or not you believed it would happen, would just have an impact on your worldview. So
I think that's really true. I think that's part of why it feels really good to see things starting to come to this point of fruition now, where, okay, well, the trees are growing, but they're never actually going to make fruit. I'm never actually going to see fruit from these.
Right.
Now this year, a lot of trees have set fruit at the same time. And I have no illusions that the wildlife, they're going to get there before I can in most cases. But hopefully, I can manage to snag one or two here or there. And it's just very cool. It's very cool. And it's such a great time to be, the world and the market are starting to catch up. So I was really happy to see that one of my favorite online gardener influencer types, who I also buy a lot of seeds from. He's called MI Gardener. He's a guy in Michigan. He's not vegan, but he has great gardening advice, organic methods, and really high quality seeds. And he is offering a vegan compost in his online store, and it's only $2 more than the animal-based compost. Sorry, not compost, fertilizer. And so I was really happy to see that. It's really hard to find. There's really only kind of one brand of commercial vegan fertilizer out there, and it's really hard to find. Usually shipping is really high. It's a little high from him too, but it's not something you just pick up on Amazon. And he puts it in his online store. He's not gouging people on it, and so that's just awesome. I don't need it. I make my own. Talk about that another time. There are lots of ways to do that, but I love that the market is starting to respond to the need for that, and for people who don't want to be putting a bunch of blood meal and fish guts on their plants, which really is kind of the only option. If you're going to go to Home Depot, that's the only fertilizer you're going to find. It's the only potting soil you're going to find. Most potting soil also is in bed with big ag in some sense. So.
Yeah. One of the first guests I had on the podcast, a guy named Graham Sparrow, who was just, lovely to talk to, organic farmer up in Ontario, Canada, or Alberta. I always get all the areas confused. But he, even though he's a vegan, he talked about how he hadn't yet found a workable substitute for the fish meal in the fertilizer. And
you got to make your own. But it's, again, you have to have patience. You have to realize it's going to take 3 or 4 weeks to make a really good batch for at least the way I make it, which is kind of a compost tea with certain kinds of plants that I grow a lot of comfrey. You can take the comfrey, chop it up, put it in a bucket, and let it ferment for a month, and it'll make fantastic fertilizer. It'll smell terrible, but so does.
How do you chop it up?
Comfrey's a little. It's not thorny, but it's a little prickly. But usually, I'll just wear gloves and tear it into chunks. Or you could, if you wanted, take a knife and chop it up. And you probably don't even really need to do that. You just need to. Just leave it to decompose, and it will smell very, very bad. And that puts a lot of people off, but they strain it out and you have a very good, you want to dilute that a little bit. Fertilizer for anything that you want to feed. And you do that a couple times through the season. And that's just a really good basic. There are other plants you can do it with. There are other things you can use as well. But you have to kind of plan for it and know that there's going to be this really stinky bucket in the yard, and that's only going to fertilize so many plants. And you have to plant the comfrey. So I planted the comfrey from seed, and it spreads like crazy if you get the right variety. The bees love it. So I think I planted 2 or 3 plants 2 years ago, and now I have a whole area that's just covered with it. So it is this really kind of, you are in relationship with the land in a really like a stewardship sort of way, where you recognize there is no immediate payoff for a lot of what I'm going to do. I can't just click on Amazon buy now, because you're not going to find vegan fertilizer that way. You've got to make it yourself, or you can find, there are sources like My Gardener out there. Or if you have good enough compost that you're making at home, you can use that instead and feed the plants that way. So there are, there are many ways up the mountain, but none of them really instant gratification.
Yeah. No, it's so interesting. And it's just so interesting to me about just being vegan, how there are always new levels and new depths that you can plumb. And remind me again what year it was that you went fully vegan?
I can say for sure I was fully vegan in 2006, but I probably was vegan for all of 2005 as well, but I can't say for sure. So,
so we're talking 20 years at this point. Yeah, a long time. Wow.
Yeah. And really between 2002 and 2006, I was 90% vegan. So,
And would you say that the gardening and growing your own food, that's kind of expanded your veganism or just deepened your sense of connection?
I mean, one of the things that's given me a lot more consciousness about is insects, so the sort of my circle of compassion has expanded to insects in a huge way. I had to today, there was a wasp building a nest directly outside the door here. And I don't really want a paper wasp nest right the door. And, it had just started building it. It's probably the queen building a nest before the babies hatch. And I'm really feeling tortured about knocking it out. I did knock it out. Not going to spray it with a bunch of nasty stuff, but I did wait until she wasn't there. She's probably out fetching more material for the nest and knocked it out. And I felt really terrible when she flew back and kind of looked around and couldn't find it. And like, it's sort of you when you're out there all the time and you're getting to know these. There was I just planted a crab apple the other day because I need a pollinator. I need another pollinator for the apple trees here. When I dug the hole, I hit an ant colony. And it was just like, the secret of Nim, like the ants scurrying everywhere. It's a total catastrophe for these ants. And it's just so you develop increased awareness of how many insects there are in the system. They are everywhere. You literally, I can't pick up a single rock here without there's going to be life under that rock. There's going to be all kinds of under that rock. It's doing its thing. And my whole intention here is to build habitat, to work with nature. And there are going to be times where, you're
at odds.
At odds. We have a conflict of interest, and but kind of having that awareness and that sensitivity, and not just this, well, I'm not going to let a paper wasp hang out in my house. You get out of here. But, I apologized to her, and I don't know what else I can do. It's kind of the same thing. I don't think we've talked on the show about I have a mouse problem as well over here, because the house is kids, and they're getting into the house somehow, especially in the wintertime. And there's just no way in hell I'm going to set, lethal traps. So I have catch and release. But back, and so it's
we have talked a little bit about that, because I had a mouse issue here, and at one point I had caught and released over a dozen of them.
And
I haven't noticed any in a few years.
They didn't all come back. And the population's much reduced. I now sort of will detect, a tiny bit of activity in certain parts of the house. But like one of them I released, I remember I heard the trap snap in the middle of the night. And so I got up, and there's this poor little scared, tiny little deer mouse in this thing, sweetest little thing. And I took her out, and, quite a ways from the house, but it was the middle of the night, so I wasn't going to walk that far. And I let her out, and that's right where I'm digging a pond right now. And I have a temporary pond liner thing that has been there since I bought the house, because I wanted to create a space. There's a natural indentation in the ground, and so it collects rainwater, and frogs hang out there and birds drink from it, whatever. But it's time to move it because I don't need it anymore, because I'm digging a proper clay lined pond.
Yeah.
And I went to pick it up, and there's a little mouse under there with a little nest. And it occurred to me, maybe it's the same one that I brought over here and left right in this spot. And she looked right at me. She was terrified, but didn't run. And I'm like, all right, I can't move this thing. I can't. Like, she's probably under there because she's about to have babies, and like, I'll give her a few more weeks and I'll check back again next month, but it's like, there's never not life. There's life everywhere. And so I want to partner with it, but also, like, I am important as well as them. And we all need to kind of find a way to live together, but I'm not going to exercise power for the sake of power over them.
Right. Yeah, it gets so complicated so quickly. And in fact, one of the questions I had jotted down for our conversation, which, we won't get to today, but we can put it on the list for next time. But it was this question: are humans evil? And it's just interesting because there are lots of different views on that subject. And it's one I myself have mixed views about. But yeah, the bottom line is just living, we interfere with other living beings, and there's no way around that. And where do we draw the line? Yeah.
It's part of why I'm interested in things like cob structures. But even that, when I was digging the pond, which is going to take me months to dig this pond. It's not even that big of a pond, but it's a big project to dig a pond by hand. And that's a whole other, I'm very into the pond era. I'm digging lots of ponds. But I was throwing a bunch of the dirt in a wheelbarrow to take out to use potentially for some cob building, because it's very high, naturally clay soil. And I came back after doing a bunch of digging the next day, or maybe 2 days later, and noticed that there was this worm in the clay that I had put in the wheelbarrow that was very close to death. It was very dehydrated. The dirt had dried out so much in the wheelbarrow, and there was nowhere for him to go. He was stuck in this wheelbarrow in this dirt. So even the dirt that I'm shoveling into the wheelbarrow has life in it, and it's going to be trapped in these circumstances that I put it in. And so I had the same sort of thing when I was trying to take some clay, and I was interested in making some wild clay pottery. And so you need to kind of filter out the clay from the rest of the dirt, and that process involves soaking the dirt in a bunch of extra water and pouring it off, etc. And
Jen, I don't know how you have time to do all these things.
This is just like whatever I do in my hour or two a day. This is when I'm not checking my texts or writing back to emails. I'm out playing in the dirt. I'm out, communing with nature, because I've made this very important trade-off to spend time doing this. But when I was trying to make this clay, I poured a bunch of water in this bucket, and then immediately realized, oh my God, I'm drowning earthworms. I'm sure there's a bunch of earthworms in there. I can't do this. I can't do it this way. I have to go through and pick out the earthworms. But I'm gonna miss other things in there. I'm being just in favor of earthworms, and so it's just really is no way to do no harm. You're doing harm. You're just doing harm. And you're doing harm by pursuing passions and interests, and that are very congruent with living in a loving way with the environment. But I haven't figured out how to do anything other than minimize harm as much as possible.
Right. Very interesting. Well, lots to think about. Lots for me to think about in terms of just growing some food. That's where I want to start. So I have a very simple starting point. You're in more advanced levels, so you have more complex issues to deal with. I'm just trying to grow some food for myself.
It just builds. It just, and if you have the like intrinsic passion for it, it will sustain itself. I mean, you just get passionate about it, and it's not like you don't have to make the effort to learn more. You just get curious about how can I improve this, or what, why did this die, or why are my potatoes splitting? Do I have low potassium in the soil or something? So you just kind of learn as you go, and it stacks. It just stacks over time. So I know infinitely more now than I knew, 3 or 4 years ago. But when I started in the having a little bit of a gardening background as a kid, but when I started as an adult, kind of in the pandemic, like everybody else, it was like, oh, I should start a garden. I was literally Googling things like, what's the fastest vegetable? Like what grows the fastest? Radishes, turns out, grow the fastest. So that was the first thing I planted and had like an immediate success. Like, okay, like this works. And so after that, it's just off to the races.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's good inspiration for me.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think we'll leave it there, but thanks for checking in. Fascinating window into the life of the gardening Jen Howk. No, it's really cool to hear about all the stuff that you're doing and how connected you are to the land and nature and permaculture. In fact, tomorrow morning, I'll be interviewing a vegan permaculture guy.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so I'll be very interested to hear what he has to say, because again, it's a world that I just know very little about, other than, my fantasies about it. It all sounds really cool and like really high level. But
he would be, people who were really in the permaculture world can speak more to the ethical commitments too, which is a whole other dimension that we didn't really get into, but it's this earth care, people care, fair share.
And he's also a Marxist.
Oh,
and so yeah, so pardon me.
I mean, it is sort of a socialist type. It's fair. That's the fair share ethic and the people care ethic. It's like, I am going to produce what I need and no more. I'm not in this to get rich. I'm not in this to exploit others. I'm in this to generate for myself and to share with my community. And so I see a lot of that. And so it continues to baffle me why all permaculture people are not also vegan, because it seems to very naturally fit into the ethics. Where's the animal care? We have earth care, people care, animal care, fair share. Like let's broaden.
Right.
Yeah. So that'll be a conversation.
Yeah, it will. And apparently, at least I'll ask him more about this directly, but my understanding is that he claims that any true Marxist must also by definition be vegan.
Oh,
because how can you not be vegan when you believe in this Marxist ethic?
Very interesting.
System.
Yeah, super interested in that. All right. Well,
stay tuned. Yeah. I'll keep you posted. Cool. So, all right. Well, thanks for checking in, and sharing your world, which is fascinating to me, because you're so good at the hands-on, like earthy stuff, which is stuff that I have a strong initial barrier to. So once I get into it, I'm confident it will feed on itself, like you said, and and it's all natural. So it's not like we're trying to make something unnatural happen. So it's more just setting it all in motion. So
you're gonna have great tomatoes. I have great faith in your tomato game this summer.
All right. Well, yeah. All right. Well, we close every episode, as you know, by taking 30 seconds of silence for all the suffering animals, human and non-human, who desire, as we all do, safety, happiness, and the freedom to live out their lives without interference. So, Jen, I invite you to join me in 30 seconds of silence for the animals, and we'll conclude with the sound of the bell. Thank you, Jen, and thank you, Posse. See you next time. Until then, stay strong and stay true.